Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Oh, hello everyone. How? I imagine the coffee is extra hot and very strong because everyone is congregated right there. Can I get you to slowly shuffle back in? Yes. Thank you very much. It seems like it was a really good break. People refresh their coffees, start some good chats, see some biscuits, some croissants. Also, everyone online, I hope you helped yourself to your own coffees. Thank you very much for being here. It's great to see so many of you. My name is Dimi, and the way I like to explain what I do is I've spent the last 10 years doing dark magic with data and math to try and help marketers prove the value of what they do. And it's really, this vocation has taken me from the creative realms of brand campaigns all the way down to the dark, dingy depths of conversion tracking and lower funnel campaigns. So I'm really honored to be here and to have the opportunity to share some of the tales of my travels, if you will, with you, and ideally some learnings. So what we'll do is we'll continue to build on the measurement blueprint that Matt talked about at the beginning, and we'll really focus on the challenges and some of the non-negotiables of building a robust and more so trustworthy effectiveness measurement and value of proof of all of our investments. And by the end, I really hope that you leave potentially a bit optimistic, slightly inspired, but definitely at least with something practical to take to your companies on Monday. How does that sound? Can I get a bit of a handshake? OK, that's OK. Chill, it's easy with the reactions. All right, so fantastic. Let's kick off with by addressing the elephant in the room, right? Which is the state of effectiveness measurement improving our returns. The reality is that we've seen an astronomical growth and proliferation of media channels that we've had in the last 2 years versus the 5 before, right? Which has resulted in an almost exponential increase in the complexity of how we measure both what different channels do and then the interplay between them in terms of the returns that we get out. This coupled with our favorite degradation of measurement signals, things like the cookies, the tracking, all of that stuff, has really proved challenging to view the full impact of all our investments. I think all of this kind of results in a bit of an odd dichotomy where you have both an unprecedented access to data, but at the same time, an almost impossibility to connect it and derive some actionable decisions for your business. So to the point where even when we do get like some really interesting analysis or piece of insight, it almost seems a bit siloed from all the other data points that we have, from the other dashboards, the MMM, or whatever you call it. And it's really difficult, A, to make sense of what the hell this is and how it reconciles with everything else, and God forbid to try and convince someone else outside of marketing of what you've just found. So as a result, I almost find that any marketing effectiveness or media effectiveness presentation or story kind of feels like an M. Night Shyamalan film where you have a bunch of caveats, a bunch of plot twists, some surprises throughout, and then you can't really believe what you're seeing. And in a very odd way, this kind of creates a bit of a potentially erosion of trust is probably a term that's kicked around quite too much. But at the bottom of it is lack of understanding of what and how we measure our success. To the point where even if we do have the senior stakeholders and leadership aligned on the marketing strategy, they might not be clear on how the hell we really track the impact that we've generated and the sales that we've brought. So that was recently even confirmed by a new piece of counter research that showed 40% of business decision makers actually, that only 40% actually feel that their business has a clear marketing effectiveness goal, which, it's almost half, you can argue with it. But on the flip side, how much do you reckon actually know how to measure that effectiveness? Any guesses? It's a bit better. It's a bit better, but I like your skepticism. That's where we're going. That is self-claimed. Yes, he's right. So I'm always questioning surveys in the same way. But kind of what this indicates is the disparity and the division in some of the opinions and the expectations in the boardroom, across the leadership. And what this means is, as I imagine all of you have experienced to an extent, is that when the economic conditions become a bit more challenging, that lack of clarity often results in marketing being the first to be challenged, scrutinized, marketing budgets frozen, and potentially cut. Which on one hand is like, oh, it is what it is. We need to save, make some cost savings. But then the result of that vicious cycle means that we save a bit of marketing budget now, then when the economic conditions improve, or we have the case for value reestablished, potentially new leadership, new team, then the investment rejustified, then campaigns restarted, we have the question of how much do we invest again? And our friends in BCG did some quite sensible maths, actually, and quantify that for every dollar we save, we then have to pay almost double to recover that lost share in sales that potentially the rest of the market has absorbed, which in and of itself is quite a powerful metric. You can always argue a bit plus or minus on these stats, but it just helps us prove that marketing is kind of the truth that we know, that marketing is that strategic longer-term investment. But the businesses that take it as more the tactical one end up suffering and paying the premium. So, I just love this finding because it opens so much. It's a bit of a reality check. But the question is, how do we navigate this? How do we narrow down the complexity? How do we build a bit of the trust? And how do we take this forward? The solution, unsurprisingly, is a nice structure and a framework. And who doesn't like a good framework? But realistically, what we'll continue to do is we'll build out on the blueprint that Matt talked about at the beginning with the 4 interconnected pillars. And while we heard the AA and ATG story about their foundational journey and how they've strengthened their data and infrastructure and how they're getting some really powerful insights and data points to feed into their bidding and systems, we'll really focus on the 3 on top now, how we build onto that foundation the insights and proof points about our media. Just to expand a bit on them, the first one is all about having a clear marketing or more so measurement plan, knowing what is the measure of success and how do we get there. The second one, the TLDR, is avoid getting stuck in the hype cycle of jumping on the next cool thing and think about what is the right balance of the insight you need and the solution you should use. And last but not least is actually get things done. In theory, sounds very simple. The question is, are we doing that? And from my experience, a lot of measurement projects fail because 1 or 2 of these pillars are not really followed or stuck to. And I have a question, so I'm curious about your experiences. If we try to get an idea, how many businesses do you think, can we do like show of hands? If you imagine how much airtime do each of these topics get in like meetings or sessions or being talked about throughout the year in a business? Can we do hands up if you think that both the vision, the solutions, and the decisions and actions get equal say? Who thinks they get a bit of a balanced view, balanced focus? No? OK. Do any people hands up if they think people spend a lot of time and most companies talk about the plans and the strategy? 1, 2, OK. That is some. OK, what about the solutions and tools? Who thinks about people talk about solutions and tools? Fascinating. And does that mean that everyone feels that most of the time businesses are focused on decisions and actions? Yeah, see a lot of hands. Fascinating. So maybe I have a skewed perception of reality. Our friends BCG did a survey of over 200 advertisers in Europe, which showed slightly different reality, which maybe a bit more aligns with my experience, but I might be off again, showing that majority of the time there is a conversation and everyone is talking about the new tools, the new toy, and how we can build a dashboard or try a new type of experiment or new attribution solution or God knows what, with very little focus being placed on these 2. So naturally, in a harmonious world, we need a good balance to get the right inputs. So we'll take a few minutes to unpack each of those, share with you a few, hopefully, practical insights and examples of how we're doing this with some of our clients and how we've seen this done really well. Some of you, I really hope, are already doing a lot of these things. Please let me know. So the first one is all about defining success and isolating what are the most impactful questions to answer. Within this, we talk about the 3 steps. First is agreeing on what are your top metrics of success. Second one is narrowing down the pool of questions that you're answering within your business to avoid getting distracted by all the noise. And then the final one is having a clear plan and, if you will, a calendar of how and when you're answering all of these questions throughout the year so that you get a timely and fresh insight when you need it. First one is defining success. And the way, put very simply, and a lot of people touched on it earlier, you can boil it down to, have we got an agreed, we call it KPI framework, it could be metrics, something that helps us limit the vast sea of possible metrics, both campaign, business, whatever, to the few that we A, care about, and B, can be linked to all the way, I think Raj called it, to the head. What are the metrics that the CEO announces in the earnings report, and what is the goal for the next quarter? So making sure we can break down both from the campaign all the way to the business outcomes, what are these metrics and how they ladder up. Once we have this, we can A, very quickly see and decide which ones are being used for budget setting, strategic decisions, versus day-to-day, more rapid optimizations. The other axis, I guess, or dimension, which is not on this slide, is the long versus short term, or the lower funnel, upper funnel discussion. It's very powerful because that tends to be something falling under more scrutiny by other departments. But what are our short-term measures and the more longer-term, let's say, brand awareness, lifetime value ones that might not be that easy to show, and how they really connect to each other, potentially through proxy metrics or something else. And then the second part, so one is kind of writing a framework, and it could be done like once, fine, and it tends to be quite stable. But the challenging thing is that I don't see too many businesses do is actually get it fed back into and shared with the rest of the teams. So with your finance, with your commercial, with your sales departments, make sure that you use this to get on the same page. And then that streamlines a lot of the potential friction later on in the year. To give you an example, our friends in the Google Media Lab, so this is Google's internal marketing team, and they run all of our advertising for all things Google, so including hardware, including whatever you name it. This is how they've solved it, how they've approached it. So we have the same vertical axis, tactical to strategic metrics. And what they've done is they've actually split out the frequency that we get the data and when the data is used between real time to 6 monthly. And they mapped, and this is obviously very small. Maybe people in the front few rows can see it and online, but they mapped around 30 metrics around how and what is useful for them and their stakeholders. I've trimmed this down. What is really powerful by having this is not just the agreement that you then get from all the stakeholders that, OK, we will be discussing only these and not throw any wrenches, but you can start to agree on what is used for what. So clearly, you have the more strategic metrics that are outcome-focused, the optimization ones, but also you can clearly agree on the target audience who cares and who uses specific ones, either by level or by function. And then the other aspect is breaking it down by almost the roles and responsibilities, who owns and both the optimization and running of some of this data. In theory, that's a lot of operational benefits, which is good, and no one doesn't hurt it. But it's really having, more importantly, using this framework is to help us drive discussion with the stakeholders so that we can get them comfortable with the metrics that we're using to prove our success. So ideally, we would have those here. In the case of, for example, Raj earlier, it could be the lifetime value for the user of the venue. In Google case, there's some of the ones that they use, so that our stakeholders can believe and start appreciating the long-term impact. And it's one of those things that there's been a lot of research around, kind of the long-term value of brand and marketing. And there's still debate. Equimetrics recently did another meta study on over 200 MMMs over a 5-6 year period, and quantified that, and this is some great analysis again, for any upper funnel media, and this is not just YouTube, it's like social, TV, everything, over half of the sales impact of those campaigns actually happen between the 5th and the 24th month after the campaign is aired. Meaning that, kind of to flip it on its head, in the first 4 months, which is typically what we would measure or would get asked to measure, in the first 4 months, we only see half of that impact. Or if you're doing an experiment, geo-experiment or whatever, and you measure maximum of 2 months, you'd only barely get or quantify 1/4 of the total impact of that long-term value. Now, is this enough to get your finance team to buy in and to believe it? No, it's some 20 random companies by some random provider done some questionable math. But I guess these kind of stats are useful when anchored to a common KPI to open the discussion of whether that should be a joint hypothesis that you prove with your stakeholders. It's not necessarily that this is the right hypothesis for you, but it's all about getting to the bottom of what are the questions that are important for your business. And this takes us to the second point. What are the hypotheses? And we get a lot of, I guess, the key challenge we see is a lot of time our time is pulled into ad hoc requests. Or what about this campaign? And is that really working? What about the short? And this obviously wastes a lot of time and doesn't drive us to a purpose. Instead, what we're trying to do is every 6 months or a year, harvest, literally, and that verb is used intentionally, harvest all the beliefs, questions, misconceptions, doubts, opportunities from across the teams, list them down as possible hypotheses, then do some sort of prioritization. Could it be potential value, current spend, potential spend, sales impact, whatever you call it, tag it as strategic and tactical. And then that will give you a sense of prioritization of what are the big questions you should be tackling first. Before you get into solving them, again, democratize, share, get it confirmed with finance, and then that really starts to unlock some of the benefits that we heard about earlier, and it saves us from kind of unnecessary back and forth throughout the year. Hopefully you've solved all of this. Then the next question is, obviously not going to labor on this, but being a bit mindful about when you need these questions answered. And this is an illustrative example. We had a client who wanted to establish an MMM that is nested for all of their upper funnel and brand metrics to prove the long-term impacts of their brand investments on their baseline sales. A bit of a niche case, but they knew that they wanted that MMM to be ready in time for the start of the annual planning, so in December. And it was quite a bit of a long roadmap. Yours might be shorter. Really, the point here is an example of be thoughtful in your annual planning or 6-monthly. Map this out to the key decision points. Hopefully straightforward, and I really hope a lot of you are already doing some of these things. I see a lot of notes. I see some people taking notes, so hopefully some good ideas. The other key challenge I see is on the solutions front, which is kind of probably the most tempting area of the whole media effectiveness space, because you get a lot of cool tools and a lot of interesting things that people talk about. There are articles written constantly, attribution models, this and that, Meridian, God knows what. But I like to always pause for a second, because underneath all the hype, there's always the reality check, which is this. Obviously, this is the very positive spin on it. But not all tests or experiments when we try to measure media are always successful. So the steps we can take are first, choosing a solution that actually provides the insight that we'll need, and I'll talk about this in a second. Agreeing the right expectations with our stakeholders, and then obviously implementing the test. And we won't really cover this because it's a very niche topic. On selecting the right solutions, it might seem simple, but a lot of times I, again, feel there's a need to go with the latest or the most robust solution. Let's do a geo-experiment on half the market and test like a change to value-based bidding or something else, which is something to be validated. But we find that obviously everything attracts an opportunity cost. The way we like to structure it is understanding what is the information we need to support the action we're considering taking. And this action tends to be more or less always linked to the maturity of the channel. It's a simplified model, but aims to illustrate kind of the progression of the different solutions. So just to give you an example, imagine, and since we're Google, I'll say imagine you're thinking about using Performance Max. It could be anything else. The same principles apply to really any other channel. And a lot of times I've heard clients and I've had conversations, we want to be using it, but should we, I don't know how to justify $50K for a geo experiment before launching it. But that's like trying to cut a tree down with a tank, right? If you don't have a campaign, the simple, obvious thing is just trial it, start it, make a small campaign, a little budget, and see how it goes. So the solution to use would be something readily available in your reporting, in the UI. Get the conversion paths, understand how the campaign contributes to your journeys, and actually get your teams familiar with the campaign rather than trying to suddenly do a massive test when you haven't even configured the creative or the bidding or God knows what. Once this is done and you have a test campaign, your teams or your agency can start to learn about your business. You can start to optimize it. And this is where A/B tests are our best friends. This hopefully helps us build some confidence, potentially increase the testing budget a bit to get a bit of scale. And when it's a bit optimized, there's always a conversation, hey, do we scale it further? Do we make it like a whole category? Does it become a bit of a something? In that case, in the case of Performance Max, we have these uplift experiments which compare the existing campaigns that you're running and that are serving the comparable audience versus Performance Max in a A/B situation. And you get the actual relative uplift, which is very powerful. And again, based on the action that you want to drive, it tells you, would it benefit you? It should be fine. And again, provided you've scaled that campaign, then we can talk about some more major optimizations, like moving to value-based bidding, moving to profit bidding, or something else. Realistically, the last two stages could be a bit interchangeable. But in this case, we recommend causal impact analysis. Your analytics team should be comfortable. The Incubeta guys are. It's a really powerful tool to analytically derive some experiment-akin insights. So derive causality insights without running a big experiment. And then the last one is, once you have a mature optimized campaign with significant spend, you're either looking to transition more investment to it, either scale it or move some other action. This is where we typically tend to talk about either in-platform incrementality experiments, geo experiments, or MMM. Now, I know you're thinking, Dimi, Jesus Christ, this is a massive list of solutions. What do I do with this? Again, the point is more to aggregate the full set of choices and options. And I just want to call out a few examples. And it might seem obvious, but thinking about one of these for a campaign that you haven't even launched is not a good return on anything, and is almost always doomed to fail because the campaign hasn't ramped up, hasn't learned your business. So even if you launched it and the test runs for 2 months, you're most likely going to see inconclusive results or poor performance because you haven't gone through that. The other useful thing is what we call kind of that list or structure is referred to it as the hierarchy of evidence. So as you go up, you kind of validate and improve the knowledge you have from the previous layers. But almost always, you need the ones below to have the right context and understanding of your business and how the campaign works to then use properly the levels above. And equally, there's the other element around the cost and benefit, right? These are readily available. These are extremely timely and expensive. Potentially with geo experiments, having the opportunity cost element where you switch off, let's say, a third of the country, potentially foregoing sales. So this is just an ask and a message to be mindful. The next time you get an email in your inbox saying, we need to test this very quickly, run a geo experiment, take a step back and really think about what is the action we're trying to drive with that and what's the right tool. I know I'm preaching, but it's something that we see a lot of mistakes happening. On the topic of MMMs, I thought it won't be appropriate not to mention on Wednesday, we, as Google, launched the new open source package for MMM, which is comprehensive open source marketing mix model. And it's very powerful because it also addresses some of the layers below on that hierarchy. On one hand, it has a specific methodological innovation around measuring reach and frequency, and how effectively recognizing that if you serve all MMMs use impressions to model, but if you serve 100 impressions, you don't know if you served one person 100 times and they're going mental, or you served 100 people once. And we know from, again, plenty of research that frequency, there's a strong diminishing return as you increase frequency, but almost linear relationship of reach to sales. So this allows us to feed in reach and frequency data into the MMM and actually get a sense of what's almost some of that right balance and diminishing returns as part of the overall scenario planning. The second point is GQV. I need to improve that slide. That stands for Google Query Volume. So as part of Meridian, there's an option to ingest normalized Google Query Volume. So almost imagine Google Trends data to act as a proxy of the background demand for some of the lower funnel activity. And the objective of this is to improve the modeling of lower funnel channels like search or something else, which tend to be highly correlated with the demand itself. And then finally is the kind of another really big topic at the top of this pyramid is how to use incrementality experiments with MMM to kind of improve the predictions and align the modeling to the reality. So Meridian also includes an easy input for you to feed those in. Even without my Google hat on, I think this is on a geeky side very, very cool and a lot of new innovations that make life easier, but I kind of had to say it because it's also happened yesterday. On the next part, as we're kind of drawing towards the end, and I want to make it quite pacey, we have the setting expectations. And I'll take only one slide on this, because, as it says here, not all tests are successful. And sometimes, especially when we are committing significant cost or time to something, there's a lot of implicit expectation from a lot of stakeholders and even ourselves. Oh, it will be successful. We'll do, this is what we'll do with that. But in reality, A, not always is it successful, and B, a lot of times, A, there's a lot of disappointment if the test doesn't work out, and C, we don't really, even if it does work out, we're not very clear. Suddenly we go into a bit of an exploration mode. What do we do with that insight now? We have this number. Where do we go? So this is just another call to action. The next time you're thinking about a large measurement exercise, think about the scenarios. Did we have statistically significant results on our advanced experiments, that is? If yes, were they positive and exceeding our internal target or threshold for profitability or incremental conversions, whatever it is? Did it not? And then what should we do? So if they are exceeding it, what is the action? It is scale investment, but also try and pre-agree almost by how much, even indicatively, so that you and the team and stakeholders can start processing this information, so that when the time comes and, knock on wood, you get positive results, you can action it immediately and you can actually drive that business change. And equally, if things don't work out, it's not a massive surprise and wild disappointment. Nothing groundbreaking, just a lot of expectations management about the reality of the situation. These percentages are I've called them likelihoods. I always get a lot of questions on them. This is based on kind of an analysis of in-platform conversion lifts, so incrementality tests we did last year. It's quite sizable. It's about 200-300. There's obviously a lot of variability, but just to give you a sense that there is a pretty good chance that we might not be stat sig. And then the last, but definitely not least, pillar is how do you drive the action? And here I want to just emphasize just 2 simple points. As we heard from a lot of the other speakers, it's quite difficult to drive that organizational change. And a lot of times we've heard, oh, we did this test, we have this analysis, and what did you do with it? Nothing, we presented it. Full stop. So what we encourage the teams to do and what we try to do is to kind of operate in a scaled approach by using effectively the simple flywheel of we always have some analysis, potentially offline or done by the analytics team, that gives us an idea of what the hypothesis, which should then inform our team to make a decision to do a pilot. And this is broader term. It could be a pilot for value-based bidding when you set up your data infrastructure. It could be a geo experiment of something else. And then with that pilot, if it is successful, it should inform the overall business decision on how and if to scale that learning to the wider business. Nothing groundbreaking, but the businesses that do adopt something like this and prepare their stakeholders for that see a lot more rapid change and success. And then when we think about what is the action, it almost inevitably, when we think about media effectiveness and measurement, falls into one of these 4 buckets. So it's either we get clarity and validation on some of the KPIs that we have or assumptions. It could be upper funnel to lower funnel conversion. It could be something else. Helping us set budgets, reallocate our investments. And this typically happens on the back of an MMM and scenario planning, but it could be on a channel-specific level. Refining targets and setting ROI thresholds or ROAS thresholds, which could be done very closely with the finance team. And I have a few slides, but I will share them afterwards in the interest of time. And then finally, it's kind of just improving and reconfiguring that your campaign performance. Nothing groundbreaking, but thinking about what those are and mapping them to the plan we talked about earlier is just phenomenal in impact. I'll skip through this, even though it's pretty good. And then to kind of wrap us in, I know that's just a teaser, so you look at the follow-up. Definitely planned. So what do we do next? And we talked about this, and I'm fascinated to also hear some of the insights from the room, especially the perception of decisions and action being higher. It's fantastic. If that is not the case in your business, I think my only urge is that from experience, any success is driven by a balanced approach where we bring everyone along. So think about what and how you can improve in your own setup to either have a bit of a balanced airtime of the different topics with the stakeholders, or God forbid, be ambitious and talk more about actions to improve your maturity and get better results. Thank you.